Aloha mai kako, you are watching Hawaii Political Reporter.
Aloha and welcome to Hawaii Political Reporter. Thanks for watching. Tonight, storm clouds gathering news on crimes and deceit in Washington. Democrats and Republicans both protect the president. What will it take to impeach Obama? CIA operatives caught in Moscow, and the financial rats are jumping ship in Washington. Then Adam Kokesh explains why he and others are taking a huge risk to stand up for our constitutional rights by marching armed into D.C. on July 4th. We then join New World next week to hear how the U.S. and Russia may have made a deal to produce the final endgame on Syria, and how the oil rights in Syria have already been given to the Rothschilds and Israel. Then, illegal domestic CIA actions are exposed, the Lauryn Hill story, and finally, how Bill Gates and other super elite Bilderberg power brokers are meeting with Jeb Bush and possibly choosing our next president. Coming soon, we will cover Senator Ruderman's town hall, the Kanaka Garden story with the Aloha Uprising, and full coverage of the upcoming Hawaii Conservative Forum event.
Just how much criminal activity does the president have to be involved in before impeachment becomes a serious possibility? Apparently, quite a bit. It seems it wasn't enough when the Obama administration got caught sending thousands of weapons to Mexican drug cartels during Operation Fast and Furious. Weapons that were used in crimes on both sides of the border and which resulted in hundreds if not thousands of deaths. Apparently, it wasn't enough that Obama has claimed the right to kill U.S. citizens with drones both in the United States and abroad, or that he's already exercised this power in the assassination of Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old son, neither of whom were involved in any terrorist activity. It seems it wasn't enough when Obama signed the NDAA of 2012 and 2013, giving the military the right to detain anyone anywhere indefinitely without trial. Apparently, it wasn't enough that Obama used American forces to topple the Libyan government without so much as asking for permission from Congress. It wasn't enough that they've been running drone strikes all over Africa and the Middle East, killing thousands of innocent civilians. If there was any real justice in America, these wouldn't just be grounds for impeachment, they would be grounds for life behind bars. No matter how you cut it, Obama is a mass murderer. But even now, with all the attention on the Benghazi cover-up, the IRS scandal where the government has admitted that it used the IRS to target political activists, and the AP scandal where the Obama administration has been caught seizing phone records of journalists, Congress is still non-committal and lukewarm when it comes to talking about impeachment. Some, like Senator McCain, have gone so far as to say that such calls are, quote, not serious. Here's the reality of the matter. The Republicans aren't going to push for an impeachment of Obama any more than the Democrats were willing to push for an impeachment of George W. Bush. In fact, they will do everything in their power to avoid having it come to that. The reason is simple. These clowns are on the same team. They work for the same corporations. The party lines are just for show. The American political system is like the World Wrestling Federation. Yes, they'll smash chairs over each other's heads. Yes, they'll throw a few choreographed punches and carefully timed pile drivers. But at the end of the night, they'll all hang out backstage together drinking Budweiser and snorting crystal meth. Okay, well maybe they don't all drink Budweiser, but you get the point. If you want Obama impeached, you're going to have to stop operating under the illusion that Congress is acting in good faith, and that the two parties have fundamentally different agendas. These guys are just as dirty and just as corrupt as Obama. They're not going to move towards impeachment unless they feel themselves to be in danger. Those who intend to contact their congressmen and senators should keep that in mind. These people need to understand that you are taking down their names, addresses, and photos, and that you will consider their inaction an act of treason. The government needs to fear the people. That's the only thing that can hold them in check. For those of you on the left who still think that this is a partisan issue and that undue attention is being placed on the Obama administration, let's be clear. Bush and Cheney should have been impeached, and they still deserve to be arrested and tried for war crimes. If you were judging Obama by the same criteria that you judged Bush, then you would be pushing for Obama's impeachment yourself. Any liberal who defends Obama at this point is exposing themselves to be a hypocrite. In world news, this week Russia's counterintelligence agency says it caught a CIA officer trying to flip a Russian operative. The accused American, Ryan Christopher Fogel, was a career diplomat working as the third secretary of the political section of the American embassy in Moscow. He apparently offered $100,000 down payment and $1 million a year plus bonuses to the Russian operative on the condition of his long-term cooperation. This seems to be a return to Cold War-era spy game tactics, only with a Dumb and Dumber twist to it. Maybe they'll make the story into a full-length film, and Jim Carrey can play the lead role. In science news, American researchers have found a way to infect mosquitoes with a bacteria that attacks the malaria parasite, effectively making them incapable of carrying a disease. The bacterial infection is contagious and has been shown to be transmitted to mosquito offspring for at least 34 generations, which was the total number of generations studied. About 660,000 people die worldwide each year from malaria. In financial news, Federal Reserve Chief Ben Bernanke has hinted that he may not seek reappointment for a third term, meaning that he will likely step down this next January. He'll be leaving before the full consequences of his quantitative easing policies set in. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner is also set to step down in January, leaving the two most influential jobs in the U.S. government related to the economy vacant at the same time. Seems the rats are jumping ship. For those interested, oil is currently selling at $94.16 a barrel. gold is currently at $13.94 an ounce, and silver is at $22.55 an ounce. If this is a message you feel the public needs to hear, then be sure to like, favorite, and share this video through as many avenues as possible. If you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel, Storm Clouds Gathering, on YouTube. For updates and bonus content, follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/StormCloudsGathering, on Twitter at Collapse Updates, and our website, stormcloudsgathering.com.
Did you join the military to protect the rights of your fellow Americans? Are you dismayed after coming home from multiple combat tours to see that for all the sacrifices made overseas, our government continues to erode freedoms here at home? Are you troubled by the lack of opportunities and economic challenges Americans face? Are you willing to risk your life once again for the American people, but this time not to serve politicians, but to actually serve the people? Do you believe, as I do, that the right of the people to keep and bear arms is essential to liberty and that some things are worth fighting for? I joined to put my life on the line for something I believe in when I enlisted. My name is Adam Kokesh, and I did a tour with the United States Marine Corps in Fallujah, Iraq in 2004, and found out the hard way that the greatest enemies of the Constitution are not to be found in the sands of some far-off land, but rather right here at home. Did you notice that too? There are some of them occupying the White House and the Capitol right here in Washington, D.C. So to those of you still serving as part of the military, who are you serving? The politicians, Obama, or we the people? Are you going to be an oath keeper or an oath breaker? Are you going to honor your oath that you swore to the Constitution of the United States of America? And if you are to be an oath keeper, what kind will you be? Will you have the courage of your convictions, or will you cowardly sit idly by as evil triumphs? America is at war with itself, and the bad guys are winning. Those who would cowardly call for government to do their bidding, and those who make it happen. The fight you are needed for is the non-violent resistance here at home, and on this Independence Day, your presence is requested in our nation's capital. We will muster with loaded rifles in front of Arlington National Cemetery and step off at noon to march down Independence Avenue, around the Capitol building, around the Supreme Court, around the White House, and back down Constitution Avenue to peacefully return to Virginia. Despite the rulings from the Supreme Court striking down D.C.'s gun laws, Police Chief Lanier has threatened to break the law and arrest us on the bridge. Will you stand idly by, or will you join us on July 4th to insist that the Constitution be recognized properly in Washington? Thomas Jefferson said, "When the people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty." Should we, the people, fear the government? Should you?
Is now. The threat is clear. The bands of tyranny are tightening around America, and it is our duty to resist. I will not tell you that the band-aids applied by Democrats and Republicans will heal us. I will not pretend that everything is just going to be okay while we are bled dry by tyrants. The challenge before the freedom movement is no less than to bring about a revolution of values, inspire a renaissance of American politics, and breathe new life into the tortured body of our nation. We will meet that challenge with courage and love, and as always, we the people will prevail. We know that the greatest threat to American security is the current corruption of our government. No politician has ever ended a war. Civil rights were won in this country not by any legislator, but by a movement. I have great hope for America, but it comes not from any election. No, my hope comes from you. Our tragic love affair with the state has led us to put far too much trust in a government that we thought could improve our lives, but has instead come to rule our lives for us. We have become, as a people, like a frightened, battered, beat-down victim of an abusive relationship. A servile, unquestioning, obedient people will always produce tyrants. we must, as a nation, once again embrace defiance, rebellion, and resistance.
Nobody else is showing the IDs.
Yeah, you got to show ID.
Sir, you're grabbing me?
And that's the problem. The decision-making matrix. Exercise your right to alter or abolish the government.
Welcome. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com.
And I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, and you're tuned into the New World Next Week at NewWorldNextWeek.com, where you can go for all of the audio and video file formats that this weekly news series is brought to you in. And once again, I'd just like to thank everyone for tuning in. I know we've been on hiatus for a couple of weeks while I've been busy attending to the birth of my new baby boy, so taking some time out to enjoy the great blessings in life. And so once again, thank you for tuning back in as we return to our regularly scheduled deprogramming. So James, why don't you take it away?
We will begin with Press TV and all the unbelievable news that's going on in Syria, as will at least set the stage with the unprovoked attack on Syria as Israel yet again commits egregious international crimes. Unprovoked, Israel has attacked Syria numerous times over the last couple of days, including attacks on the Syrian capital of Damascus in what appears to be a series of intentional provocations designed to drag the region into a wider conflict its U.S. sponsors can then enter militarily. Neither attacked directly by Syria nor able to cite credible evidence in regards to perceived threats, Israel claims to be reacting to the assault on Syria represents a Chapter 7 breach in the United Nations Charter. So, James, the other story that was swirling around this, and the main part that we want to kind of key in on here, I'll just take it from Mashable.com. As, of course, we note, anytime an army wants to go into a city, the first thing you do is you got to get those communications devices. I may be speculating, but let's check it out. The 19-hour internet outage in Syria finally ended. The outage began at approximately 3 p.m. Tuesday. That would have been May 7th, 2013. But essentially, internet connections in Syria coming back after a nearly day-long outage, again, starting at 3 p.m. Tuesday, sparking fears the country's military was preparing an assault against rebel forces following the Israeli airstrikes on Hezbollah-bound shipments of guided missiles in Damascus. On top of that, interruptions in Syrian internet service have in the past coincided with significant military operations in the country. Jumping down in the article, Syrian state media blamed the outage on a faulty cable, though experts indicated to the BBC that was unlikely. Dan Hubbard, chief tech officer at online security company called OpenDNS, speculated the outage might have been the result of government tampering. The internet, this cuts to the heart of it right here, James, the internet has essentially become a parallel theater of combat in the Syrian conflict. Anti-government rebels use it to coordinate, share news, and connect with the outside world. Hackers aligned with the Syrian government attack news outlets and other organizations they view as anti-government, often hijacking Twitter accounts to spread propaganda. So, James, the other bit that I found really interesting to this, coming from the artist formerly known as the Intel Hub, those guys, Shep and those gang, it's now the Intellihub.com. Israel granted oil rights in Syria to the Murdoch and Rothschild Genie Energy 2 months ago. So when we learn that story from 2 months ago, that makes perhaps these seemingly unprovoked airstrikes perhaps come into view. James?
It certainly does. Things are definitely afoot in Syria, and it's a bit of a fog of war scenario right now where we can't say exactly what is happening or why or how and who's doing what, but we know that things are definitely changing on the ground there on a basically daily basis now, and it looks like we are coming, I know we've said this before, but it looks like we are coming into some sort of endgame scenario there as things really do start to heat up, and obviously the Israeli strikes in Damascus itself, just a huge escalation of what's going on there. And interesting that that this is coming now, just a couple of weeks after Sibel Edmonds, of course, was on the Corbett Report talking about how the Boston bombing leads back to Dagestan and Chechnya, and how that might play into a Syria situation, and perhaps Russia making deals with Washington on Syria. And now we have John Kerry meeting with the Russian foreign minister and saying that there's room for deals to be made, and we have Israel doing this, and we have the internet going down. So something's happening there, and I think we have to keep our eye on this quite closely right now. And I think Tony Cartalucci hits the nail on the head in his report on this, how basically Israel has just committed a major international war crime, aggression, violation of international standards. But of course, it's just going to be completely and utterly exempted from any criticism in the mainstream media. So we should be here to document it, and we will be. And of course, you can check the show notes for this particular episode, where you can find all of the articles that we're talking about.
And speaking of those show notes, James, just a couple of other related notes on this first story that I think will segue into our other couple of stories this week. Stephen Hawking joins academic boycott of Israel, and it looks like they're kind of spinning it in it's purely related to his health. However, Stephen Hawking would by no means be the first person to boycott Israel, and this is the sort of academic boycott of Israel. And you can get more on that from The Guardian. The other media synchronicity note, James, I found really interesting. I've been watching late at night. There's an original Netflix series directed by David Fincher called House of Cards. It's a U.S. version of a U.K. show. But in the middle of the episode, where basically a scorned congressman decides he's going to exact his revenge on everybody who wronged him and betrayed him in Washington, he basically just plants the seed of a story of the soon-to-be Secretary of State may have questioned the legitimacy of Israel. And as the scene plays out on the show, basically they have the real George Stephanopoulos talking to this Secretary of State. Oh, did you author this article back in college about saying, the Palestinians and, illegal occupation? And they love it. And that was the way in this show that they basically destroyed this Secretary of State, was just by dangling the possibility that perhaps he questioned the illegal occupation of Israel. And he's just, it's Machiavellian evil. Kevin Spacey sits back and tenses his fingers, seeing the destruction he caused being even more successful than he thought it would be, just by touching that political third rail of Israel. James, our second story is something we pretty much spent the whole evening on earlier tonight on Ground Zero talking about, and that would be the re-education of Lauryn Hill. Now, I found it interesting just about a week and a half ago, April 25th, and we'll include all these links again. Lauryn Hill signed a 5-song $1 million deal with Sony to avoid prison. So I found that I was like, oh, wow, she's going to kind of come out and go, okay, I'll give you essentially an EP of songs, and that'll pay off my bills, and it'll be okay. But then today we see that Lauryn Hill has gotten 3 months in prison for failing to pay taxes. And even more so, James, we'll grab it from the IB Times. Reclusive soul singer Lauryn Hill has been jailed over an enormous unpaid tax bill. Fuji singer Hill, age 37, was sentenced to 3 months jail, followed by 3 months home confinement for failing to pay $500,000 to the taxman in the United States. Hill claimed the sum was outstanding because she had withdrawn from society after alleged threats against her family. She was imprisoned after failing to pay the amount within the stipulated 2-week time frame. During her trial, Hill was ordered by the judge in Newark, New Jersey, to undergo counseling because of her conspiracy theories, including that artists are being oppressed by a plot involving the military and the media. Lauryn Hill pleaded guilty to charges of tax evasion last year. Her lawyers said she had paid more than $970,000 in an outstanding tax bill, which amounted to more than $2 million. Hill vanished from public life to raise her 5 children by Rohan Marley, the son of acclaimed reggae singer Bob Marley, following the success of her album The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill way back now in 1998. Shortly before she was arrested last year, Hill penned a diatribe declaiming the music industry. In that rant, Hill blasted pop music for a, quote, climate of hostility, false entitlement, manipulation, racial prejudice, sexism, ageism, over-commercialization, and its resulting restrictions and limitations can be very damaging and distorting to the inherent nature of the individual. James, I'll include the flashback to my own MediaMonarchy.com back in June of last year. Lauryn Hill's taxing problem, manipulated and controlled by a media-protected military-industrial complex. James.
I didn't really know that was in the realm of wild-eyed, crazy conspiracy theories, because I've heard a lot of artists talking about that exact same thing. Of course, usually when they start to age and mature and find that there's no room for them in the music industry that just wants to churn up and spit out new talent every few months. But I mean, one of my favorite musicians, Billy Corgan, has talked about this at length many times. So we'll see if he gets sentenced for his conspiracy theorizing. But it's interesting. This is just, I think, another one of those cases that they love to trot out now and then, to where they can throw a high-profile person in jail for tax evasion just to remind the peons their place in society. So we can think back to Wesley Snipes, who I believe recently got out of jail for his tax evasion practices, et cetera, et cetera. So the obvious moral to take from this story is that tax evasion is wrong and you'll go to jail unless you're the Treasury Secretary, aka Geithner, who of course got away with fudging his taxes back in the day and got little more than a slap on the wrist and became the Secretary of the Treasury. You know, no big problem there. But of course, if you're a big name talent, they want to throw you behind bars and make an example out of you. So this is exactly what's happening with Lauryn Hill, and it's disgusting, but it's exactly what we would expect.
And I can't help but find the comparisons between her situation and somewhat someone like Dave Chappelle, who essentially found himself like, oh my God, I don't want anything to do with this system whatsoever. I'm out. James, the other kind of interesting esoteric note that I really found today is you looked at the news and it was basically the sacrifice in some way, shape, or form of three women. Again, this is Western media today that we're subjected to. Hillary Clinton, Lauryn Hill, and Jodi Arias were these three women that were all sort of sacrificed in the media landscape today for all their various wrongdoings. Parallel to that, we also have, of course, the important human interest story of the three women and their salvation from this Ohio, kidnapping camp. And of course, you're already seeing, I've seen it happen this afternoon in Oregon, the copycat effect is already kicking in. So now, of course, it's, oh my God, there's going to be this kidnapping epidemic. I found it just really interesting on a esoteric level. Perhaps it's a little bit of as above, so below. Having said all that, James, let's now move quickly to our third and final story, as we are kind of crafting a bit of a media theme. And this is a story that we have reported on, but of course the hits just keep on coming. The CIA requested Zero Dark 30 rewrites. A newly declassified CIA document suggests members of the U.S. agency did help to shape the narrative of Zero Dark 30, Catherine Bigelow's recent film about the hunt for Osama. Several elements of the draft screenplay for Zero Dark 30 were changed for the final film upon CIA request. Jessica Chastain, the lead actress, and her character Maya, the film's main protagonist, was originally seen participating in an early waterboarding torture scene, but in the final film, she's only an observer. A scene in which a dog is used to interrogate a suspect was also excised from the shooting script. Finally, a segue in which agents party on a rooftop in Islamabad, drinking and shooting off an AK-47 in celebration, was also removed upon CIA insistence. This was agreed to despite the documented use of dogs in U.S. interrogations of terror suspects at Guantanamo Bay in the early days of Junior Bush, and despite some of the photographs from the later Abu Ghraib scandal featuring, of course, dogs menacing naked prisoners. The memo appears to confirm suspicions of a cozy relationship between the CIA and Mark Bull, with the agency confident it would be portrayed positively due to the level of help it had provided to the filmmakers. Quote, as an agency, we've been pretty forward-leaning with Bull. A CIA staff member wrote to colleagues in documents released last year. He's agreed to share scripts and details about the movie with us, so we're absolutely comfortable with what he will be showing. James, I'll also include the flashbacks again to MediaMonarchy.com, noting, of course, that the White House gave special access to the filmmakers. And what I found in my own research, James, and again, we've kind of talked about this, is that the same guys essentially involved in the constant curation of this Osama bin Laden myth go from the late 70s and Cyclone and all those dudes and Robert Gates and Zbigniew Brzezinski up until this present day, where some of those same folks are still involved in talking to Catherine Bigelow and talking to Mark Bull and keeping the constant, because like Bush Jr. said, you got to keep repeating things to catapult the propaganda. Meanwhile, the truth, you just kind of have to drop it once.
Well, you're exactly right. This is something that we've talked about before, and I'm sure we'll talk about again, because every time it rears its ugly head, I think it deserves to be smacked down as the whack-a-mole that it is. It's just such a disturbing and disgusting practice in the supposedly land of the free, home of the brave, that the Central Intelligence Agency, whose very mandate for its existence is to operate in foreign theaters and not to operate at all on the American soil or to influence the American public, has an entertainment liaison officer that works specifically with Hollywood to develop and produce scripts that put the agency in the best possible light, which is, again, a complete 180 against what the mandate of the agency supposedly is. We all know it's not really about that anyway. It's about just putting out the CIA propaganda in the most effective way possible. And I suppose the only thing that's surprising about it in this day and age is that it's so above board and on the table. It's been there for half a century at the very least with the CIA and the news media, etc. But now they're pretty open about what they're doing. And probably the most disturbing part of all of this is how little the public seems to care about it. I know the listeners to New World Next Week, people who tune in every week, will undoubtedly be more on the ball on this issue, but it's important to keep in mind, I mean, I would suggest not giving your hard-earned dollars to buy into this propaganda, but at the very least, even if you do, at the very least, go in with your thinking cap and just realize that any big budget mainstream Hollywood flick is going to be influenced by the military-industrial complex, the Pentagon, the CIA. They all have their fingers in these pies, and they're all trying to program your mind. And the only thing that I can say about that is your mind must be valuable if they're spending all this money to try to get at it. So the best thing you can possibly do is to refuse to let them into it. But at any rate, let's try to starve them of the money and the attention that they're so desperately seeking from us.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's something our good friend Richard Grove has always talked about. Why would you continue to give money to people who have openly, documentably been lying to us? Our third and final story this week, James, Bill Gates, Bloomberg, and the world's richest all meeting on a gated South Carolina island. Has the Bilderberg meeting maybe become a little too mainstream for some of the world's richest elites? Warren Buffett and, of course, the Monsanto-linked Bill Gates to Oprah and Jeb Bush. The local media in South Carolina began reporting a little bit on closed-door meetings between billionaires and politicians at the gated beach island of Kiowa, South Carolina. So this story from StoryLeak.com basically points out that it seems like only one CBS affiliate there, WBTW, is reporting on it, where they note that 20 highly expensive jets were lined up at the Charleston International Airport on Johns Island, and that Bill Gates and others were at the Sanctuary Hotel on Kiowa Island. The attendee list, according to the CBS report, includes Jeb Bush, Mayor Michael Bloomberg, Bill and Melinda Gates, Dan Gilbert, who's the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Warren Buffett, Oprah, and many, many more. We wish them luck with what they're doing, Mayor Charles LaPuma said. If they want to play golf, they couldn't have picked a better weekend. We are glad we could offer them great weather. The mayor is just so thrilled he could offer them up some great weather, so who cares what they're actually doing? So who cares about any of the concerns of whether or not, it completely violates fundamental laws of crafting policy behind closed doors? But James, who cares?
No big deal. No, this is shades of the Good Club. I'm sure everyone might recall back May 5th, 2009, when at the president's house at Rockefeller University, Buffett, Gates, Rockefeller, Turner, Winfrey, and others met a combined net worth of $125 billion. Conservatively, met behind closed doors to talk about population reduction, and that came out little by little in a few stories here and there in the international press. And this time we don't have any inroads so far as to what they're talking about, but I bet you if it ever does come out, it'll be something along the lines of population control, eugenics, biometrics, whatever the next craze might be. And it's important for people to keep their eyes on these types of meetings as much as possible as well. Obviously, a lot of attention gets put on things like the Bilderberg meeting that's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks here in Watford in England, and deservedly so. I think obviously people should show up there. They should protest. They should make their voices heard. They should let them know that we are watching them. But equally so in this connected age, I mean, we would be ridiculously naive naive to think that Bilderberg was just this one-off thing that happens once a year, and that's the only meeting that takes place. Obviously, these people are meeting all over the world at all times, and not necessarily face-to-face. This is an electronic age. So all sorts of backroom dealings go on that we can only begin to even get a sense and a tingling of what's going on.
Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express.
You try a hide and destroy a freedom man. You sick agenda, we know you anti-American. You come forward American Constitution. 1913, corrupt in the system. Devalue dollar, hyperinflation. The Federal Reserve, controlled by Lucifer. He can see you lying.